They could tell I was smart, but I just had a lot of trouble with reading and organizing my thoughts around that. And just like literally a week ago, my mom gives me my old work where it's like kindergarten and like first grade.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zell. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it.
Joining us today is Kate McGee, Director of Health and Safety for Pennoni, overseeing safety for over 1,400 employees. Kate's journey began as an environmental consultant where she discovered her passion for worker safety, compliance, and training. She joined Pennoni in 2013, where she has been instrumental in developing and owning the firm's safety programs, including job hazard analysis, processes, job safety assessments. She is certified in OSHA 10, OSHA 30, construction outreach training. Kate's a champion of culture and safety in the workplace. She lives on the front line, empowering her employees and all employees to take ownership and engage in safety proactively. So, Kate, thank you so much for joining me, and I've been excited about this. So, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, good. I've been nervous, so I'm glad you're excited.
Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. And thank you. I sure appreciate the fact that you're being honest from the get-go about your nerves and because you know what? This is kind of an unnerving process. It's a human podcast, and I always like to talk about that. And so I always like to kick off the dialogue around our personal journeys. And a lot of people have heard mine, so I'm going to start with yours, Kate. Tell me about just kind of your journey. I know that you live in New Jersey and that you were born and raised there, but tell me about kind of how your journey began in early days and how you ended up where you are.
I always had an interest in science, particularly in medicine, and showed an aptitude for that, especially through middle school and into high school. Although interesting, I mean, the journey. It starts with the educational piece. My mother just reminded me of something with my struggles early on in school. We were just talking about this. In fact, God, it's weird I'm bringing this up, but I have I have a condition called convergence insufficiency, which means my eyes don't play nice with each other. It creates blurred vision. I wasn't diagnosed with this until I was 30, and it was after I had an eye injury. But all throughout my grade school, especially early on, my mom had a lot of concerns about how I was reading in particular. They could tell I was smart, but I just had a lot of trouble with reading and organizing my thoughts around that. And I just like literally a week ago, my mom gives me gives me my old work where it's like kindergarten and like first grade. It says like great kids, slow reader. And so that kind of like haunted me academically for a long time, where it was, when you're considered a remedial reader, but at something clicked, where I was able to adapt. I'm still a slow reader, but I was able to adapt and pick up tools and stuff. And so that developed my work ethic through that. And that's what I became known as, like pretty smart, very hard worker. And that actually, I think in retrospect, directed me to different types of learning where I knew writing English was great because it got to be expressive, but reading high volumes of English was always a challenge. Ordering of certain things were a different challenge. So the types of course material where it was very lecture oriented, where I could listen and then organize my thoughts, I kind of gravitated towards. So I think that's what got me into science and biology in the first place. And in medicine. So then that, I developed an aptitude there, went to college for biology, thinking I was going to be pre-med, decided after seeing the student loan bills, I'm like, I need to start making some money. So
Understandable.
what could I do with my Bachelor of Science in biology with that and still use some technical muscle there? And that's back in the day, back in 2001, you could still find jobs in the paper in the classified section. So my parents had a copy of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I'm looking through want ads and classifieds, and I find this position for an assistant project manager with an environmental consulting group. So
I just had this conversation with somebody yesterday when I was in Denver at an event, and we were talking about how your first position tends to be happenstance. And if you're not, and if you're fortunate, you find something you're passionate about, but sometimes you end up on a career path just based on the first job of the first thing that you are hired into. And people are risk averse, and often they don't make that change afterwards and go down a path that they didn't love. I'm glad that you obviously have a passion for this, so that's a wonderful thing. So yeah, so you went into this environmental consulting as a entry level person, and keep going.
yeah, and so I worked for that organization for about 7 or 8 years, and halfway through that employment, the that company was growing in the types of business that they were chasing. I think Aveda and IS Networld in particular was just starting to become very prominent. So I started doing some of the technical writing on program development there, since I developed good skills for writing. Surprisingly, bringing it back to that arc. So I'm a pretty good researcher. So developed those programs, and then they also hired a consultant who was a CHMM and specialized with a little bit of process safety education, as well as consulting for environmental health and safety. And I got to partner with him and his direct report quite a bit, and through those specific events was really introduced to the world of health and safety. I had experience through environmental consulting, and that EHS side has a lot of safety components, especially with HAS WAPR compliance. So there's a lot of technical spin on it, but then moving more towards the safety side and some of that additional EHS consulting on the process safety side. Just developed some extra skill sets and was like, this is what I want to do.
So what were you doing for in the Aveda and ISNet world? Can you explain for those who are unfamiliar with both those organizations and then where your company was doing in relation to those? Were you working with one of those companies, or was this in a supporting structure at that time?
I would consider myself more on the support staff side of that particular organization. And I should say it was, I don't know if at that time they were connected with Aveda. It was certainly IS Networld. But if you're not familiar with IS Networld or Aveda, or there are other platforms out there as well. Highwire, for instance, happens to be one of my preferred ones if I had my druthers. Basically, what these services do is evaluate a company's safety program on behalf of their client. And it's
Right.
common for people in the energy sectors, manufacturing sectors. We're seeing pharmaceutical growth. Highwire came out of actually like Harvard, and that's how I got introduced to them, because the company I'm working for now was, I don't know, that's a whole other story. But anyway, they evaluate your safety program, give you a grade, give you a score of some sort. And if that score meets the client's expectations, you're good to go. If it doesn't meet client expectations, you have some work to do. And in some cases, it's insurmountable. So when you're engaged with these safety sensitive companies and clients who want to use these platforms to evaluate your safety program, it's very important that you're managing the documentation around that, whether it be your written programs, your incident scores, and your training. And in that first employment group with that first company, I helped out with the written program elements and the training side of it, which are two things I still enjoy working on.
That's fantastic. So interesting. And it's I we do a lot of work with both ISN, ISNet World, as well as Veta. And Highwire, we are seeing more and more. They're coming out very strong right now. So that's actually quite exciting because, there's been, Browse was one of the groups of the past that I think it was acquired by Veta, if I'm not mistaken. But there's been organizations, but those have been the two leading groups. And it's very difficult to keep up to standards, and if somebody's allowing you to be a subcontractor or not based upon your rankings there, it's really important. And so tell us a little bit about Pennoni and kind of what you all do as a company, and your place inside that organization? I assume, I assume that after you left that last organization, somehow you ended up here. I want to try and fast forward you a little bit just so we can make sure we give you time to talk about what y'all do. And I did a little bit of reading, and man, your markets and services are massive. So you guys are a pretty big organization.
Yeah, we were big, and the current CEO is very focused on growth, especially through acquisition. So Pennoni is a civil engineering firm. If you need civil engineering services, we probably provide I would say, an excellent version of that. And if we don't, we probably know somebody who does. So, especially if you're focusing on the East Coast, Pennoni itself was founded by Chuck Pennoni, who was still a member of the board. He founded in 1966 in the city of Philadelphia, which is where our headquarters still are. And I'd say over the past 10 years, when I first came on in 2013, we had somewhere around like flirting with 1,000 employees, and now we're up to 1,400. A lot of that, some of that through organic growth, and a lot of that through acquisition as well. Civil engineering is a fun field. You know, in thinking about aptitudes, people who are excellent at math tend to gravitate towards engineering. Highly technical group of people. So it's really fun working for a professional services organization. For me personally, it's fun working for a professional services organization with a lot of people who like to use their brain and think critically. Because when I say something is a thing, they're not going to take that at face value. I have to come correct. So I have to do my research and have my due diligence and have my conclusions and recommendations well supported through data or through legal precedent. So one of the things I love as a safety professional working for this organization is that I think it's really sharpened my skills in terms of research and communication with such a savvy group. But it's got Pennoni's and ESOP, which I also had no idea what that was before I started working for Pennoni, and I don't think I could ever work for an organization that's not an ESOP now.
Yeah. So an employee owned. For those who are unfamiliar, the employees own all the shares of the company.
Yes, and not necessarily 100% owned, but I am proud to say that Pennoni is 100% employee owned, which is, when the firm does well, when we all do well, we get to see benefit from that in compensation, largely through the ESOP program, which is a retirement program, and just how it's outperformed. I think most employees look at getting a match, like a certain percentage match on their contributions. When you're in the program, you just get the money, you get the profit share, it goes into your retirement. And the percentages, especially in the past 5 years, have been it's amazing to see what it's done for my retirement account. So it's
Fantastic.
I feel like an owner, which is nice. So
Well, and that's exactly what you want. I mean, that is
mhm.
the you want all of your people, especially in an organization the size of yours, to have ownership, and
Mhm.
to have ownership in not only obviously you're a professional services organization, and so a
Mhm.
lot of your people are out in the field, but it goes back to the foundations of safety and the foundations of everybody goes back to OSHA, but the reality is OSHA is a minimum standard. But if you don't have ownership in your company, in your activities, in your fellow human being, then you can't really run a safety program effectively or impactfully. So I love the fact that you brought that up. I think it's really important. So in your practice, who are the types of clients that you serve? I say, Kate, who's your top 3 or 4 industries or type? You don't necessarily have to talk about customers per se, but clients per se.
I mean, we have a really good mix in both public and private sector. Civil engineering naturally lends itself to a lot to both, really. But when you think about a lot of the local any municipalities or any governmental groups, they're going to need support from a third party. So we support large contracts with PennDOT, a lot of DOTs that are in the area. We also are the municipal engineer for a host of municipalities. And what's cool about that too is when you're consulting as a municipal engineer and you're also like a resident of that area, I think it's just so neat how our my colleagues live in the area and can also shape the communities that they're living in. So and help, assure proper functioning, especially from a public safety standpoint. Engineering is one of those professions that, it's really cool to work with them and see how the business works and how that particular, skill set works, and it influences the areas that they live in. And, Philadelphia, for instance, we work we're working on some massive projects. There's one really exciting project. I don't think it's covered under an NDA any longer, but I'm not sure, so I'm not gonna call it out. But it's really cool to see how my colleagues support the local communities and shape it and help keep the roadways and infrastructure safe. Uh, and the public side, private side as well, we have a lot of clients.
When you're conducting surveys and assessments and gathering data, how do you execute that? Do you use third parties? And of course, I'm being a little self-serving with Yellowbird because it's something we do. But I mean, but do you use third parties to go and gather information, to do site walks and to do surveys, or is it always done with internal people?
From a
Because
safety program management standpoint, we are
safety or environmental or otherwise, any of these.
yeah, we rely on our internal staff, for that expertise. I'd love to do more in that space, so I think there is an opportunity to bring in an outside consultant for that. Uh, but for the most part, the management of what we do really is internal. So each of our offices, we run very to help to help with our rates, honestly, and our profitability. Our firm runs very lean, in terms of administrative staff. So, for instance, corporate safety staff of 1,400 employees is me and my direct report, PJ. And so we have to rely on local people to help us administrate the program. And it's really in the hands of the local staff and the local management to make sure that compliance is done. We support that a little bit in our offices through the Office Safety Coordinator program. And the role of those folks is to make sure our office safety elements are up to speed. So, checking on the first aid kits, the fire extinguishers, compliance with the emergency action plan, postings on the bulletin boards that need to go up, access to all of our documentation, so that when somebody, locally, an employee in the office says, "Hey, what am I supposed to do about this thing that's safety related?" They can be a point of contact to funnel to the various resources that we have, or perhaps escalate, to my department.
So as we have this discussion, I keep thinking about where you start internal and where you go external. So you've got two people in your safety program internally. You have 1,400 employees that are out there on client sites. Do you run external programs to give suggestions and improvement and methodologies around health and safety concerns, or are you mostly focused on internal staff, making sure that they meet their health and safety requirements as employees yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. My core responsibility is to manage our corporate safety structure, and verify we have the resources in place. But I do I do some consulting. Tomorrow, I'm driving up to North Jersey to train a group of folks on confined space entry. Pennoni also, one of the services that we provide, we're predominantly civil engineering, but we also have support services, and that includes 100 EHS professionals throughout the firm. And they are not my direct reports. I do, and in fact, sometimes when I have questions, I will reach out to whomever I believe is an expert in the space and ask them for their consultation, because we have quite a few CHSs, and I'm a CSP, but we have other CSPs and ASPs on staff as well. Everybody has we can only absorb so much information, and everybody has their own little specialties. So I'll reach out to them for their consultation. But yeah, sometimes they bring they bring me into projects, helping this one client up in North Jersey. So I'll do some of the written program development. Actually, for this client, in addition to the confined space training, I also owe the project manager a review on a heat illness program. So I do a little external consulting as well. It feels nice to flex that muscle, because I was doing that for the prior organization, when I was. So it's nice, and it's nice to look at their programs and see how they think about things, and that also gets me to look at our programs a little bit differently as well. So it's nice to have that consultation with others, and just really, I think, help strengthen my perspective on how I make different decisions.
It's quite interesting because when I look at so the principles and concept of Yellowbird on our side has always been, how do we know that a specialist is a specialist? How do you know that they really understand the subject matter to a level that they can teach somebody in the field and get 5 stars and actually speak the language? As you know, just because you can teach confined space doesn't mean that you'd be ideal to go to a utility company construction zone and go into the trench and actually teach it on site versus in a classroom. Like, those are very different skill sets. And, with 7,000 some odd people on our platform, it's pretty easy for us to execute that type of thing. I always wonder whether or not organizations who are running these large programs and they give recommendation of we would recommend that you go down this path and you put together a quarterly flagging training for anybody who's on public roads, or you put together a OSHA 30s or OSHA 10s, or, fall from heights, any of these types of things. We've never really partnered with a engineering and professional services organization like yours. So it might be interesting discussion. How do you guys view where you start and where you stop as far as your client needs are concerned? So you've got pretty deep relationships, it sounds like, and some of them may be nationwide, but you probably only serve them in certain areas, or you're living on airplanes, and which is a possibility too.
Yes, and I mean, sometimes there are contractors that we work with. The firm has 8 regions. One of the regions that is the most geographically diverse in terms of who we serve is our Region 6, which is construction services and inspection. And when we're serving the DOT clients, the steel or concrete that's being manufactured, for the Tappan Zee Bridge, for instance, might be out in Washington State or even up in Canada. So, at that point, the hiring process. I was just having a conversation with this RVP yesterday about hiring and onboarding process and the assessment of competency. So, one of the things Pennoni values highly is certification, and especially professional highest credential. And when you get to the P level, the CSP level, or the CIH, these certified external certifying bodies, a lot of times you and I think about this often in terms of the work I take on, you agree to a code of ethics. And a lot of that code of ethics is that you will only consult or make recommendations, especially externally for money, on areas that you feel competent. So, and for me, that's one of the things, and we talk about that constantly in terms of, are we right staff? Do we have relationships with others that we feel could meet that business need? Is this just not something that we do? And to be on the business side, I don't get for external client consultation. I don't get too involved in that. Usually I'm being brought into a project by another senior manager that says, I think Kate would be good for this. So I'll staff those projects. And then there have been a few things like somebody brought an expert witness thing to me, and I'm like, I'm not touching that. I took a look.
Yep.
I'm like,
Exactly.
Nope, not for me.
Yep.
Thank you. Let me make a referral. Perhaps you want to try talking to this person. But it's I think a lot of, especially when you get to the professional level, if you're genuine about adhering to your code of ethics and applying that, you just try and find people of good character and good integrity. If you
Right.
have, and what's nice, one of the ways we manage that, I know I'm kind of digressing. Is that okay?
That's okay. No, please. No, I'm enjoying this.
One of the things that I love that Pennoni does is, especially our current COO, is a big investment, not a big investment, but attention to bringing on grads. So
Yes.
bringing on grads who are either in college or fresh out of college, or just one or few years into your career. At that point, you have a chance to mold their professional perspective and set the expectations of what's normal. So you're in effect shaping what their moral character is, or how they do problem solving, and what they value. And through that, that's kind of like a safer way to take somebody who doesn't isn't at the higher level decision-making process, but help bring them up through the culture and make sure that their values and the way that they problem solve meet your expectations as an organization. And in fact, our current CEO is an example of that. Dave DeLizza, he started at the firm when he was a Drexel graduate, hired by Chuck Pennoni, and now he's the CEO of the firm. And when I look at even with my current direct report, I've always debated, do I want to bring on sometimes it'd be nice to bring somebody on who's already, you know, knows how to make a phone call and a fax, has that level of experience. But I still default to the grad level because I'm like, I'll invest the year or two that it takes to get through like the normal, this is what basic business conduct is, and like, break them into that so I can start setting like my expectations around how do we conduct this work ethically and appropriately.
I spend a vast majority of my time identifying how we can isolate those key elements that are not school book elements to a professional on our platform. And so we do things like do virtual interviews where we're using AI to ask questions and answers around interpersonal connectivity. There are people who are better at drafting documentation than they are at teaching a class. There are folks who have had real world life experience in the trenches, and those who have gotten out of school and went straight into a consulting or contracting role, which is nothing wrong with that, but it does get you into an environment where you do need to teach what is a best practice around a business environment. And the vast majority of where we are now, because I can identify skill sets, certifications, background, degrees, all these things. Our platform is very, very powerful from that perspective. But then you get into the interpersonal. How do I know that they're going to meet the cultural flavor of the client? How do I know that they're going to engage in an appropriate way? Take ownership, but not too much ownership. Communicate with respect, but not authoritative to a CEO. Rather than, there are these gray areas that are very difficult to assess, even with employees. Do you find that to be true?
Yes, but I mean, getting back to the client point, I've worked for enough clients. Some people, it really depends on what the client's style is. To your point, some CEOs, we've talked about bandwidth in the past. Some CEOs are just tell me what to do and present a good argument. All right, let's go. And other CEOs are, I need, from a personality standpoint, I need somebody who's a little more diminutive and will provide a softer touch on the recommendations and, have a little more collaboration there. I think I think for the most part, getting back to bandwidth, people just want to say I won't say highly effective CEOs, but the CEOs I like to work for are like, what do I need? Give it to me.
Sure.
Like,
Well,
does that make sense? Why does this make
it's
sense?
a
All right,
trust,
yeah,
but it's a
yeah,
trust, but it's a trust factor. If
it
if
is.
your organization is brand new
Mhm,
to a relationship, they
mhm,
don't, and you haven't earned that trust, there's no
mhm,
way that they're going to be able to do that. But
mhm.
once you're at that stage, and that's an evolution, right? It's
Yes.
always an evolution, even with your employees. You can't just have an employee come in and immediately have the trust of the superiors
Mhm,
or peers. They
mhm.
have to show how bright they are and that they're able to work collaboratively and all that stuff. I just spent
Agree.
the last 2 days, and you didn't go to National Safety Council this year.
No, I was going
Yep,
to. I had it
yep.
slated and then didn't.
Life happens. Life
Yep.
happens. In fact, I didn't end up at NSC either. I was actually
Oh,
speaking at at another conference in
but you
Denver.
were in
Uh,
Denver.
but I
Okay.
did have two people. I did have two of my folks there, and so that was wonderful. And they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
But I personally was over at this insurance. They asked me to do a keynote kind of a thing on
Mhm,
essentially connectivity and why human knowledge is more powerful than AI,
mm,
and why AI is going to enhance human knowledge
mm,
capabilities, but it's not going to replace it. And I
mhm,
firmly believe that.
mhm,
But we spent about 2 days talking about, outside of my keynote, about the personality types of, if you can do your all your various personality assessments and everything else. But there are distinct differences in types of human beings between those who are nurturing and action oriented versus those who are knowledge based and blueprint type of people, where they want data, they want facts. Why is this true? And you go, versus want to know about your family, want to know about your friends, want to build a relationship. Then let's get into education of the value, and then let's get into the knowledge, right? And so, and those are just two very, very different things. And I find it fascinating because the one size fits all no longer applies to almost anything we do. And I think technology is helping us advance the ball on setting expectations for people. I want to start onboarding our customer and asking them those questions so that I can match them with a professional with a very similar, so that their needs of how they communicate and our needs of how our pros will communicate align.
What are you doing with that? Are you doing personality assessments?
We are, but we're doing it in a very subtle way. But our new professional onboarding workflow has some Q&As, and it's on video, and you ask questions. It's some are impersonal, most of them are business, but we're gathering the personal aspects of it. And on the other side, we do want to start asking our customer when they come on, what kind of people do you like to work with? They're not true scientific assessments of, are you a XYZ on a chart kind of a thing, but what do you value in the people you're bringing out? And do you want somebody who is a talker and charismatic and can hold a room and can really be, or do you want somebody who's very factual and fact-based and can be, maybe worked for OSHA at one point, or was a firefighter before they're doing your fire assessments? There are just certain things that I think we're going to be able to do. And I'd love to work with you on it at some point, because I think it would be kind of fun, Kate, to see what your thoughts on this, even assessing your own internal folks, because it's just a fascinating. It's the piece that AI can't do for you, but it can certainly help you figure it out.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, all of that's predicated on people knowing what they like and want also. So that's a whole there. I don't know that you can 100% solve that.
I think everybody, if they're asked the right question, knows what they want. They just have to be asked the question in the right way. Like if I said to you just naturally, hey, if you're going to a social endeavor and you're going out to a group of people, would you rather be in a room of 100 people dancing and partying and jumping around, or would you rather have an intimate, dinner party with 5 people talking about something intellectually stimulating? Answering that question, which I think I know your answer, by the way, but answering that question would tell you the beginning of how they want to be communicated with. They're more likely an analytical, data first kind of a person, dig deep rather than broad. And some people are like, I just want to have a good time. Let's go. Those are usually the sales guys and the
Yeah, I was
mortgage
about to say,
brokers
we
and
call
so
them
forth.
salespeople.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it's true. And the world needs
Yeah,
salespeople.
we do.
And we do. And sometimes you want a salesperson with a knowledge set doing your training, and people
Uh-huh.
don't realize that.
Mm.
But you want people to fall asleep, or do you want people to actually be engaged and learn the subject matter? It doesn't mean that they can't give you a good subject matter component, but we've all been in a room with people who know the subject so deeply that everybody who's listening is falling asleep.
Mhm.
I have that example from a week
Yeah.
and a half ago.
I
Guy at
would
MIT.
I would challenge not knows it so deeply, but is so far in the weeds, people fall asleep.
Yes.
'Cause
Fair enough. Fair
yeah, I
enough.
mean, you
Yes.
think of somebody like an Alan Watts, and
Yeah.
this guy, master of what he knows, but I could listen to him, Feynman lectures, fascinating.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
somebody who really knows their stuff, but they can communicate it in a way that's engaging, and that is a
Yep.
skill set. That's a skill set that, I have a theory on why people bore people and why some people don't. And my theory is that if you're too concerned about getting through your talking points, you're probably going to be boring. if your concern is about not getting through the talking points, but making sure the people get the information, if that's what your intention is, then I think you're probably not going to be boring. I mean, there is a little bit in there, but it's more about, are you serving yourself and your content, or are you serving the listener? And like, when I talk to people who are really intelligent and could be great speakers, they're like, I have to deliver these bullet points. And like, yes, that's true, but what's more important is that people accept they accept your bullet points. So you got to look at it that way.
It's so interesting. No, it's fascinating because I was actually thinking this is a great podcast and I have no idea if we covered what I'm supposed to cover on this podcast, but we are having such an interesting discussion around the human aspects of what we do in conducting a cultural world around safety and environmental. And there are the bullets that we have to get through. Now, not today, not on this call. I don't have to do it. I don't have to do anything. My goal is to talk about Kate and why you guys are doing great work and why you do what you do. And I think we're accomplishing that and learning about you as an individual. And I've woven in how we look at it at Yellowbird, because that's part of my job is say, look, when you have these large organizations that need trainings and need surveys, we are complementary because we think of things the same way you do. But that's the extent of my mission. If you're doing a training where somebody actually has to do an OSHA 10, you're doing 10 hours of OSHA training, there is an appropriate amount of data and testing that you need to uphold. So you can't be completely on one side where, man, that was the greatest training ever. What did you learn? Some OSHA stuff. No, probably not. Probably not the best. You don't want that. And then the other side is, oh my God, they just hammered all this data in my head. Like, and I never want to see that person again. Well, you don't really want that either. So as we wrap up, because I can't believe we've already talked for almost an hour, and which is great, and I love it. Time flies when you're having fun. So as we wrap up on this and we look at kind of the lessons that you've learned through your journey, particularly around both environmental health and safety, what are the areas of focus that Pennoni sees unilaterally that you have been able to help, really improve, where you've been able to come into the organization or be part of the organization and say, using our learning management system, using our job hazard analysis, using our various things that you identified as a ongoing risk and something that you've been able to help impact just personally?
I think population matters. So, people are inherently problem solvers, but engineers are that to an nth degree. So if I plant, awareness is a big part of the message. It's kind of, if you can educate someone to the problems and why, and get them on board with what the issue is, especially engineers, are naturally going to try and fix it themselves. So I identify, a lot of what my messaging and efforts have been are creating that awareness piece. And I find when I have effective and engaging awareness pieces, which for me, and reflection is just talking to people. It's doing the half an hour lunch and learns, it is doing the 30-minute webinars, it's going out, it's shaking hands, and doing the field audits periodically, and not trying to focus so much on the checklist, but more of, our data says that we have these problems. Here's some recommended practices from the industry in terms of how to tackle it. Does that apply to you or not? And asking that question and having them troubleshoot that and test, is the solution effective, has probably been, with this population, my most effective way of tackling the issues and getting people to really buy in to the different interventions, which are all the same things that we always default to. Is it training? Is it your job safety analysis? Is it your pre-inspection, your inspection schedule? I was talking to somebody about how can we tweak a supervisor observation program to focus on some of these elements that are a little bit of a weak point. So it's just that, those basics, just the basics of that, and letting my natural problem solvers do what their brain loves to do, has been probably the most effective intervention that I see for our group.
Incredible. I think that's a very smart way of looking at it. I think the repetition and frankly the old you can't have expectations without having you have to inspect what you expect kind of a thing. You can't manage what you don't measure, all those cliches, but the reality is it's true. And I find that in EHS and particularly on safety practices, we don't standardize consistent surveys, consistent site surveys, walks, things like that, because they're very expensive to execute in most circumstances. And so if you're doing once a year or once every 6 months and people have these randomized testing, I think we do everybody a disservice, because repetition is absolutely key to all of this, and making sure, and making sure that these smart people who come up with their own solutions aren't negating the company policies, because that happens a ton where you end up having people being so smart. Well, I'm going to make sure nobody electrocutes themselves, so I'm going to lock the breaker
Yeah,
room.
I do have to be careful, especially with some I've had some recent reminders on that point actually, where it's let me be clear on what the recommendation is around this, because some people the problem solving is good when someone is unemotional about it.
Yes.
That's when it's good. When you
Yes.
start bringing in the human emotion, especially defensiveness around the conduct, then the solution that they could come up with, like, I don't it could be excellent. It could be the craziest thing you've ever heard, and, like, nobody with any ounce of common sense would ever think that that's a good idea. So, I agree there is some there is some framing and reputation and validation and verification, that you need to do, with that, and then, concurrence, an actual conversation where the expectations are communicated and you get affirmation that there is like, they agree, they understand, they agree, they will, for lack of a better word, comply. But, you know, that they will let's say execute. That's probably a friendlier way of looking at that. But sometimes no, you will when they're so defensive to the point that it's starting to become a thing, that then there's always the hammer of like, well, you will comply or you will not be here.
Yeah, and that's never something you should have to do, because at the end of the day, if you get to that point, you've already lost. You've already lost.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing that I see. I didn't see that as much of an issue when we were 1,000-person firm, but now that we're a 1,400-person firm, those outliers, those extremes of where you're like, do we really have to go there with this? Like, is this is like, to be hyperbolic about, is this, do we have to go the nuclear option on this in terms of somebody's employment? But obviously not the preference. But you just get some people that are like, there's no way to coach, train, or discipline this scenario. So we have to decide they're just too risky as an individual.
And that does happen. And that often happens, it's funny because that happens a lot on the revenue side of the house, where I often ask, if you have the absolute worst cultural person who's producing the most amount of income, how do you handle that? Are you willing to release somebody who is a cultural, underminer, and really they are not good for the organization from every other perspective, but they are great at their job and produce income? And it goes back to the same thing. At what level of being unsafe or creating an environment that is truly an unsafe environment, either intellectually, physically, or otherwise, when do you draw the line? Even if they're great at their job. And that is a really, really difficult discussion to have.
It is, and I think it also depends on where the company has prioritized their values. Like, what are the values that you live, and are you willing to stick to them? So with Pennoni, excellent reputation is at the top. We excellent reputation is at the top. So if we're looking at a thing where it's like this person, are we, whatever people are involved in the risk assessment, are we in agreement that this person is jeopardizing our excellent reputation, which influences all of our opportunities for success? Then a lot of times the conversation becomes a little bit easier.
It's a great point.
What does that organization value as their priority? And I would say that for any professional and anybody who's talking about culture, you can't have a real cultural conversation about any topic unless you look at what the company genuinely believes in as the priority. So
That's a testament to your management for sure, that they actually have that they have those principles and they've reinforced that.
I do feel lucky to work for an organization and to have the other thing that I'm very privileged to have is working in the headquarters. I have a chance to talk to our chief legal counsel all the time and our COO and our CEO, and I can see where the alignment is on the values. So for me to as a safety professional trying to make recommendations to everybody else, I'm like, I've had enough conversations with these guys to know where their head is at. And I can just tell you, like, and I'll have conversations with people. I'm like, we need to fix this or I need to escalate. And nobody wants to escalate. Let's just fix this. All right. Let's just fix it, get it done, move on. I was going to circle back to your point where it sounds like the example you gave is they're prioritizing profitability.
Right.
If profit is your number one value, then that's what they're going to pick.
But it is very difficult. It's very, very difficult to, especially if you're in the construction world, and this happens a fair amount. I work a lot in construction. We work a lot in time-based productivity environments. And so sometimes you have to slow down to be safe. Sometimes you have to halt work, which is going to put you behind on schedule and maybe behind on budget. But it's the right thing to do for the worker, and also shows the worker and the community and the environment that you value them as human beings more so than the profit. That's easy to say. It's very, very difficult to do. And so it's rare to be tested like that, right?
And I think the larger the organization, the harder it gets. Because like I said, for me, I can talk to chief legal counsel. I can talk to the CEO. I can talk to and I've had enough conversations with these individuals to know and understand where their priorities are and, what our priority is and what we value as a company. But when you whisper down the lane, so, we look at, that's my hierarchy. I'm like, I report directly to the COO who reports to the CEO and the board, right? Other people, we get lower down the chain and it goes RVP, office director, business unit director, then you have frontline, or maybe there's even supervisory staff in between. And that is also the challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges is how do we get the messaging through all of those filters, right? And how do we keep that consistently? Which is why they always get back to, you got to inspect what you expect. Are you documenting your expectations on this? Because then we all agreed on a piece of paper, right? This is what we're doing, and how are we, and so you can go back to that piece of paper and say, well, this is what we're supposed to do.
Sounds like a great Yellowbird survey execution, by the way. I'm just saying, site surveys are the easiest ways of doing this. So, I'm going to, with my subtle sales pitch, I'm going to wrap up.
Yeah, it's very subtle.
Very subtle, like a freight train. No, but I'm going to thank you so much at this point and tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation. I hope to have you out here again. If you're ever in Arizona, please come visit me. And I'll do the same when I'm in your neck of the woods. And let me know if we can be of service. And I look forward to seeing you next time.
Me too. Thanks, Mike. My pleasure.
That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit go.yellowbird.com. yellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.